Welcome to the 2023 State of American Energy. Please welcome to the stage Amanda Eversole, Executive Vice President and Chief Advocacy Officer of the American Petroleum Institute.
Okay, good morning. Good morning and welcome to API's 2023 State of American Energy. I am Amanda Eversole, Executive Vice President and Chief Advocacy Officer here at API. And on behalf of everybody at API, thank you so much for joining us today in person. Yay! So if you've been to or watched any previous SOAE events, welcome back. It's great to see you in 3D this year to discuss America's energy leadership. Here with us this morning, we have just what America needs to solve our energy and climate challenges. And that's a diverse coalition of policymakers, innovators, and problem solvers. We are joined by members of Congress from both parties, Biden administration officials, labor leaders, trade association executives, congressional staff, leaders of the African American, Hispanic, Asian American, and Pacific Islander, Indigenous, and many other communities. And we appreciate you all making the time to be here today. We are especially happy to welcome several energy leaders in Congress, including today's participants, Chair Cathy McMorris-Rodgers, Representatives Cuellar, Fletcher, and Peltola, who will join us on stage shortly. We also want to thank Dr. Burgess, Representatives Hearn, Musser, Miller, Zinke, and any others that I have not yet seen. My eyes are going, so I apologize. Our newly divided government certainly comes with challenges, but also opportunities. Opportunities to build consensus and advance that consensus, which results in durable legislation. API is here to advance these important discussions, turn ideas into actions, and share analysis that supports American energy leadership. Shared solutions to shared challenges. That's what today is all about. Most of you are already familiar with the work that we do at API, proudly representing 600 of America's U.S. natural gas and oil companies in all parts of the energy supply chain, whose operations support more than 11 million jobs. What you may not know is that just last month, API signed a memorandum of understanding with industry officials in the Ukraine, so as that when the oil and gas sector begins its recovery as a consequence of the war there, that API's standards will help to ensure that the country's infrastructure operates both efficiently and safely. And what you may not know also is we have more than a dozen of these types of agreements all around the world. These MOUs spotlight a big part of our history, going back to 1919, when API was founded as an organization to set standards for how we make, move, and improve American energy. API is proud to continue that work more than 100 years later, but our mission remains the same: to influence public policy in support of a strong, viable U.S. oil and natural gas industry, and to promote safety across the industry globally. At home, domestic supply chains remain snagged. Inflation is still too high. Russia's war in Ukraine nears the start of its second year while uniting the West, even as it presents energy security challenges across Europe. Yet Washington has not yet adjusted to meet this new reality. Instead, misguided policies in government have contributed to the largest energy supply and demand imbalance in decades. More must be done to meet demand at home and abroad, and it starts with producing more American energy. There we go. That was my new equivalent of dropping the mic. There you go. Okay? We're going to roll with it. As you'll hear throughout the program today, our industry is focused on innovations and investments that will pave the way for a lower carbon future while meeting energy needs for American today. You'll hear this a few times today, but it's worth repeating. The solution is here in America. America has the resources, we have the technology, we have the knowledge, and we have the drive. API is calling on everyone in this room and those who are watching us online to be part of that solution. We intend for this morning's discussion to continue long after we leave here, so why don't we go ahead and get started? Thank you.
Energy reaches each of us every day. In our homes, our cars, in the palm of our hands. But even with energy so close, unless you see what's out there, you might miss a world of possibilities. America's energy. Our natural gas and oil resources, made, moved, and improved every day by 11 million men and women working tirelessly behind the scenes across the nation. We gear up. We show up. We protect what's here. We shape our future. But to us, this is just a Wednesday. Out here, out here, out here. We work to make smarter, better energy. Energy that we can rely on as our need for it grows. Tackling today's complex problems together and solving tomorrow's big challenges. So we want to invite you to experience the solutions that are out here.
Please welcome to the stage Mike Summers, President and Chief Executive Officer of the American Petroleum Institute.
Good morning. Thank you all for being here and welcome to the 2023 State of American Energy. API has held the State of American Energy for more than a dozen years. This is my fifth as President and CEO. In previous addresses, I've described America's energy advantage and the benefits of developing our resources and building our infrastructure to strengthen our nation. I outlined innovations enabling America to deliver reliable energy while leading the world in addressing our emissions challenge. And last January, as surge in demand was causing new pressure on global energy markets, I warned about what would happen when nations who depend on oil and natural gas from suppliers that prove unreliable and push agendas of their own. Weeks later, we saw that warning give way to reality. On February 24th, Russian tanks rolled in and missiles rained down over Ukraine. Overnight, Europe found itself on the losing side of a decades-long bet on Russian energy. Prior to the invasion, Russia supplied 40% of Europe's natural gas and over a quarter of its imported crude oil. By summer, Russian natural gas exports to Europe had plummeted 75%, and Europeans faced soaring energy bills, and they were hoarding firewood and lining up at the gas tank. America got caught up in the crisis too. Russia's invasion of Ukraine added volatility to a global market that was already stressed by the effects of a COVID-driven supply and demand imbalance. Russia was a major supplier of diesel around the world, creating global bottlenecks and price spikes that left few nations immune. As in many times before, the world looked to America for energy supplies and for help. And that's what makes this year's State of American Energy different. Every day, this country and this industry and our workforce are demonstrating that the solution is here in America, and the world is watching. Many of us can remember a time when America wouldn't have been able to step up. We think back to our own energy crisis in the 1970s, when gasoline lines stretched blocks long and our pumps ran dry. We remember more recently when some experts proclaimed that we were in the twilight of the oil and gas industry, even as energy demand outpaced supply. But American innovation changed the arc of history. The story of the shale revolution, which opened vast new supplies of oil and natural gas right here in the United States, American energy stepped up to meet that demand with the support of presidents from both political parties. The result was greater security for the American people and our allies. But we've learned from Europe and seen over the past year how our strong energy position is not inevitable. It's not self-sustaining. It must be cultivated, reinforced, and prioritized by policymakers and our industry. In the past year, the percentage of producing leases on federal lands hit a 2-decade high, while our industry created tens of thousands of new jobs and increased the number of oil rigs to the highest count in years. We're meeting domestic needs while also sending record levels of natural gas to Europe. Meanwhile, the Biden administration offered for lease the fewest acres in America for energy development since the end of World War II, and implored suppliers and other nations to ramp up their production to meet America's needs. Today, as the next Congress gets to work, we're presented with a new opportunity. Either Democrats and Republicans can renew the consensus that enables our great nation to help meet energy demand and tackle climate change, or we can continue down the path that helped lead us to this moment, limiting American energy and relying on unstable nations around the world. Our national security and the security of our allies is at stake. We at API have a plan that will put us on a path that is more secure, one that involves bipartisan problem solving in Washington and continued American innovation. We're optimistic about its prospects for a couple of reasons. First, some of the major energy accomplishments of the past were achieved in bipartisan fashion, from the Energy Policy Act of 2005 to lifting of the crude oil export ban in 2015. It won't be easy, but divided government gives us a real chance to build consensus around meaningful reform. Second, the American people overwhelmingly agree that this must be done. Nearly 9 in 10 American voters agree that we should be developing our own energy rather than be dependent on foreign suppliers. And nearly 3 out of 4 Americans recognize how critical natural gas and oil are to their energy future beyond even 2050. The state of American energy is strong and resilient. Production is up. Refiners are operating at peak levels, generating more product than ever before. And emissions are down as natural gas continues to replace coal and innovations abound. But we need policies to enhance the American energy supply chain, not hinder it. The state of American energy could be much stronger through bipartisan cooperation, a reversal of rhetoric from the administration, and serious policies that encourage investment and enable development. Throughout history, government and businesses have worked together to solve many problems, from challenges to public health to national security. Today, I want to present a blueprint for how we can further protect American energy from the challenges that we share together. It's a plan in 3 parts: make, move, and improve American energy. It all starts with make, because today's fundamentals are straightforward. We face a global supply crisis, and today, Americans are increasingly poised to suffer under the biggest imbalance between energy supply and demand in a generation. For the past 2 years, energy policy has been too much of not enough. Instead, America needs more of what's under our feet: more natural gas, more oil, more energy. The Biden administration and some leaders in Congress have gone out of their way to restrict production, unfortunately, leasing fewer acres for oil and natural gas than any administration since World War II, when demand was a fraction of what it is today. Delays in proposing a 5-year offshore leasing program, enabling the administration to halt further leases, and the government not holding a single quarterly sale for onshore energy development in 2021, even though sales are required by law. In 2022, in the thick of the European crisis, the administration held just a single round of sales. Add to this a barrage of negative rhetoric leveled at the American energy and fuel producers, and you're left with a coordinated undermining of the capabilities of the world's leading oil and natural gas producing nation. Even in the best of times, this would have been a challenging moment. But mix in a post-pandemic surge in demand and a war in Europe, and you get a global energy crisis. So how do we resolve it? Well, we won't resolve it by tapping into the nation's emergency petroleum reserve. That's a Band-Aid, it's not a cure. Remaining reserve capacity will not cover America's long-term energy needs, and we won't resolve it by asking other countries to produce more. We resolve it by acknowledging energy reality. Independent experts agree that global oil and natural gas demand will increase over the next 30 years, driven by an expanding middle class. In 2023 alone, demand is estimated to increase by 2.7 million barrels a day to more than 100 million barrels of oil used every single day in the world. That demand will be met one way or another. If America does not meet it, it will be met by countries that do not share our security interests, our environmental standards, or our values. The solution is right here in America. We just need to seize it. Now we need the Biden administration to join the consensus of the American people and every president of the modern era to open areas to offshore and onshore for safe and responsible energy development, to take steps to free up private investment. We're not asking for federal dollars. We're asking for private capital markets to operate freely. And it starts by reversing the rhetoric. If the government signals more support for American energy, it will boost investor confidence in future projects to unleash supplies and strengthen infrastructure. The next step of our plan is move. More energy development counts for little if we can't get resources to where they're needed. That means new pipelines, natural gas terminals, and fuel infrastructure, and cutting the years it takes to bring them online. Today, it often takes more time to acquire a permit for a project than to build one. And even after you get the permit, litigation can go on for years and years. This hurts families, businesses, the environment, and our strategic partners around the world. Closer to home, in New England, natural gas costs up to 8 times more than it does in Appalachia, because government won't approve a pipeline to transport natural gas produced just south in the great state of Pennsylvania. In fact, many homes in Boston still use fuel oil or imported natural gas for heat because they lack access to cleaner American natural gas. That's the sad irony of blocking pipelines on environmental grounds. Also suffering from our inefficient permitting process are our allies, and by extension, our own national security. Our European allies chose not to develop their own resources and had few options other than to rely on their hostile neighbor to the east. It takes the government years to approve new liquefied natural gas terminals. Now that Europe is in tremendous need, the White House wants the industry to flip a switch to increase our share of global supply. These are long-term investments, and it just doesn't work that way. Government needs to enable these investments in production, in transport, and in refining consistently over a period of years to deliver reliable energy here and around the world. That is why we need Congress to come together to reform permitting now. We know it can be done. Proposals in the Senate share the goal of a modernized infrastructure. You will hear later today from Representatives Cuellar, Fletcher, Peltola, as well as Chair Kathy McMorris Rodgers, who have been strong bipartisan leaders in this effort. They know it takes infrastructure to move energy to refineries that upgrade oil into products that we use every single day: plastics, tires, carpets, contact lenses, and more. Thousands of life's necessities, in other words. Both parties know the importance of getting permitting reform done. It's time to do it. Next up, as we make more energy and move it more efficiently, we're also improving how we do it. The objective is to get more energy with fewer emissions. But how do we get there? Adding new sources of energy helps, but pretending that we can simply replace oil and natural gas with wind and solar does a disservice to Americans and our allies, not to mention the environment that we all share. If we ignore skyrocketing global energy demand, countries that have little or no regard for the environment will be happy to meet that demand. And they'll meet it with sources like wood and coal and the higher emissions that go with it. And let's not forget that oil and natural gas are required to make and transport wind turbines, solar panels, and electric vehicles. Turning away from natural gas and oil isn't going to make these sources go away, but it will lead us into a deeper energy crisis. Isn't a better question, how can we reliably and affordably produce the energy the world needs at the lowest possible cost and cut emissions at the same time? We have some answers. It does not start with hefty subsidies or complex regulation, but with innovation. Look no further than the American ingenuity that powered the shale revolution and enabled more American natural gas. It ushered in a switch from coal to natural gas for electricity generation, and America lowered its emissions more than any climate policy has. In fact, between 2005 and 2020, America had the greatest emissions reductions of any country in the world, nearly as large as the combined reductions of the entire European Union. And we have innovation to thank. Our industry is leading the innovation race. API's Climate Action Framework, our industry's plan to tackle the climate challenge, details how we're doing it and what we can do next. Today, our industry is investing, innovating, and building a workforce around carbon capture, utilization, and storage technologies. We're also strengthening our energy production processes, which have lowered methane emissions intensity nearly 60% in the largest producing regions in the past decade. We're working every day to bring emissions down further. We formed the Environmental Partnership 5 years ago. It now represents more than 100 natural gas and oil companies. These companies have pioneered unprecedented collaboration around reducing methane emissions, including on flare management. Meanwhile, we also support the direct federal regulation of methane, and we're providing analysis to EPA as they finalize their methane rule. It's in everyone's interest to capture as much as possible, and smart regulations can enable this while we're encouraging ongoing innovation. But one thing is clear. Stifling the use of natural gas does not help, especially to achieve our shared goal of environmental protection. Is a policy that lower emissions in the United States but raises them abroad a sound environmental policy? The best thing that we can do for climate is to produce more of America's oil and natural gas and share our energy innovations around the world with our allies. One analysis found that if we were to replace the world's coal consumption with U.S. LNG, the emissions impact would be enormous, greater than that of electrifying every U.S. vehicle, putting solar panels on every U.S. home, and doubling our wind capacity combined. Producing and exporting more American energy helps the planet, our people, and our partners. I recently visited an offshore oil platform in the Gulf of Mexico. When my tour was over, one of the crew members, Jim, pulled me aside and said, "I know our industry gets disparaged sometimes, but I want you to know that I'm proud of what I do here. We're making the energy that America needs." Workers like Jim have, of course, done a lot already, and they want to do even more. Our job as innovators, as policymakers, as Americans, is to empower them to do it. If we don't, we're asking for instability. Just imagine what our world would look like today if previous administrations had not fostered American energy development. How would we fare in the current state of play if the United States were producing just 7 million barrels of oil a day, as we did in 2010, compared to the 12 million barrels a day that we're producing now? Supply would be lower, and our security would be far weaker. Not only would we be unable to help Europe, but we would be in the exact same vulnerable position, just as reliant on foreign powers. We've seen it across the Atlantic this year. When your adversaries control your energy, they can weaponize it. That's not just a risk for America, but for the entire free world. It's better to learn that lesson now rather than later. Because if America fails to be an energy leader, who else in the West will take our place? Who else will forestall a security crisis? And who else will lead the movement toward cleaner production and energy innovation? No other country will. It must be, and it has to be, the United States of America. And that requires our leaders recommitting now to America's role as a global energy leader, because our energy security posture is not automatic. It's not self-sustaining. When you pick up any number of products made or moved with oil and natural gas, or lift the gas pump, or turn the knob on your thermostat, that's the final step of thousands of people, the culmination of years of investment, development, and policy making. We can't tell America's oil and gas workforce today that their work needs to end, and then months later, tell them to quickly come back. We must get to work now. And the solution is right here before us. Some of you know that I spent much of my career on Capitol Hill. One thing I learned over the years is that the things that last, the things that endure, they happen when Democrats and Republicans and independents work together. So much of the rest, subject to change. That's why I'm confident that now is the time for lasting, meaningful change that puts America on a secure energy path. Last year, Europe learned the hard way that energy security is national security. It's time to implement that lasting lesson here in America with business and government working together. We know the solution is here. Government policy must reflect our resource abundance, our ability to build, and our willingness to get better every step of the way. API and our industry are here for it. We're ready to do the work, ready to put in the time. This year, with this administration, with this new Congress, to craft and enact bipartisan solutions to make, move, and improve American energy. I hope you'll join us. Thank you.
Please welcome to the stage House Energy and Commerce Committee Chair Kathy McMorris Rogers and Mike Summers.
You're on.
It's a hot mic. All right. Very
Kathy,
good.
welcome.
Great.
Thank you so much for being here today. We're so honored
great
that you're
to
here.
be here,
Great
Mike.
to be here. Such an honor to be with you. I think this is your first interview since you became chair of the Energy and Commerce Committee.
You are right. It's official now. Thank you.
It's such an honor to be here with you. I've known you since you became your first term in the United States Congress, and it has been so great to watch you in House Republican leadership for all those years, as the ranking member of the Energy and Commerce Committee, as chair of the House Republican Conference, of course, and now as chair of the Energy and Commerce Committee. It has been so neat to see your rise. You've been part of Congress for a number of years, but you started in an orchard in the state of Washington. You worked at a McDonald's and then joined public service right after college. So it is such a great honor to be with you. I would love for you to start. We had quite an eventful beginning of the United States Congress, and we're gonna see what divided government looks like over the course of the next couple of years. And I'd love for you to reflect a little bit about what you see in divided government over the next 2 years.
Sure. Well, a big thank you, Mike. Great to be with you. Great to be with everyone. We're in anticipation of the 118th Congress, and I am quite honored to be serving as the chair of the House Energy and Commerce Committee for the Republicans, the new Republican majority in the House. And it is true, I've been around a while now. I've served in leadership for a number of years with some in the room, and have seen Congresses, divided Congresses, contentious Congresses. But I share what Mike said in his comments about the most meaningful, lasting legislation often comes when it is in that divided government, when Republicans and Democrats come together, work together on solutions. I'm really proud of the Energy and Commerce Committee. And to be leading this committee, because it is a committee that has such a culture and a history of being a committee that really wants to dig into these issues. And if there ever were an issue whose time has come, it's energy, just all of the focus on energy, how important energy solutions are, the importance of American leadership, and especially as it relates to energy, is really on all of our hearts and minds right now as we start the new Congress. You mentioned the Energy Act of 2005, lifting the ban on crude oil in 2013. I also would highlight the Energy Act of 2020, which was significant energy legislation that was passed in the last time when we had a divided Congress that expanded the nuclear power and energy efficiency, tribal energy, and others. But at that foundation, I believe energy security is critical. We must have energy security. American energy security is national security, is economic security, and it is driven by having reliable, affordable, and abundant clean energy. And I believe that the United States is the one to lead that to make it happen.
So one of your predecessors as chair of the Energy and Commerce Committee, John Dingell, once reflected on what the jurisdiction was of the Energy and Commerce Committee, and he pointed to a globe. And he said, that's my jurisdiction. So tell us about what some of your priorities are, particularly when it comes to energy going into your new chairmanship.
Right, well, those of us, and I have several colleagues here, and it's great to have colleagues that are on the Energy and Commerce Committee, want to be on the Energy and Commerce Committee. Those decisions are being made later on today, but it is, yeah, Dr. Burgess is here from Texas, and Lizzie Fletcher, and Dan Muser, Max Miller, I guess some others left. It's bad when you start listing names here because you don't want to miss anybody, but this committee does have broad jurisdiction but certainly the issue of energy is going to be at the forefront of the 118th Congress. And the Republicans have been leading on a securing American energy package of bills. As I said, we believe that American energy independence, security is so important. We must do more. So there's a lot in these packages, but I would say it's focusing on securing American resources. It is on permitting reform. It is on modernizing energy infrastructure, LNG exports. As you mentioned, we just have 50,000. So there's new LNG that we're exporting into Germany to power 50,000 homes there. One of the best things that we could do to reduce carbon emissions is to export LNG. It's important to domestic energy production, but also to helping our allies and the overall goal of bringing down carbon emissions. We need to be promoting carbon capture and sequestration and promoting renewables, promoting nuclear power. America needs to lead on next generation nuclear energy. We have just, again, exciting technology that's being developed the small nuclear reactors, modular reactors. I come from the Pacific Northwest where we're dominated by hydropower, but across the board, America needs to lead and unleash American energy so that we are dominant in energy production to meet our needs. You can't do anything without energy. It is foundational to everything. So as the chairman, John Dingell, said, when you think about our jurisdiction, but when you think about energy, I would just say it is foundational to everything. And just yesterday, we had a roundtable discussion with some people on the front lines talking about rising energy costs and the impact that that has had on us as a people, as an economy. So we had the trucking industry, agriculture, farming. As energy costs have gone up, that is directly impacting the cost of food that we're seeing, and the impact on people trying to fill up their cars with gas or heat their homes. It's a very real impact. So we want to unleash American energy and lead the world in cleaner energy solutions that we know are so foundational to everything that we do.
You know, one of the key things I think that we would love to see Congress act on this year is real permitting reform. We feel like we got really close to it at the end of the last Congress, and we hope we can build on some of those efforts going into this Congress so that we can actually get the energy from where it is to where it needs to be. Do you think there are prospects for that on a bipartisan basis to get some permitting reform done this year?
I do. Was it Newt Gingrich that said, nothing like an idea whose time has come?
That's right.
But this is an idea whose time has come. I've been in Congress now a while, and it's actually my 10th term. And I think back to when I was first elected, and I was asked to lead a task force to modernize our NEPA laws. Okay, and that was Richard Pombo, chairman of Resources. He says, we're going to get Endangered Species Act reform onto the president's desk. This is when George W. Bush is in the White House. And then, Kathy, I want to come along with NEPA reform. We need to update our NEPA laws, right? And I was like, yes, let's do this. And, you know, we traveled the country, and I remember that we saw the impact of permitting and the regulatory challenges on oil and gas, transportation, mining, forestry, across the board. I believe that this is the number one barrier to doing anything, manufacturing, making anything in the United States, building. It is the regulatory climate, the permitting challenges that we are facing, and we must address how long it takes and the costs that are associated with permitting. So the good news is that last Congress, towards the end of the Congress, we had Democrats, especially in the Senate, but Democrats in the House too. Calling for permitting reform. That is important, and the effort led by Senator Manchin, Senator Schumer, as well as other Democrats in the House. I mean, I'm not saying that I believe that they got it right, but there's first of all, it is recognizing that we need to address the permitting in the United States of America. And you know, they were focused more on getting wind and solar to the coast. I have concerns about making sure that we maintain local input in these permitting decisions and who's going to be bearing the cost. But the first step is to recognize that we need to address the permitting in the United States of America. It is, as I said, the number one barrier to doing anything, and we can do better. From my time when I was leading on NEPA reform legislation, I know that we can get better outcomes at a lower cost without lowering any of the environmental standards. We celebrate as Americans our high environmental standards, and we have some of the cleanest air, cleanest water in the world because of that, and we want to maintain that. This Congress, Garrett Graves has led on legislation, the Builder Act, which is NEPA reform. We have other bills, and we're going to continue to work on permitting. It doesn't matter. So you think about, you shared some of the challenges for oil and gas. Hydropower takes 10 years on average. We haven't permitted a new nuclear plant from start to finish since 1975, when the Nuclear Regulatory Commission was put into place. We haven't permitted a new nuclear plant since then. So you just go down the line. Now, wind and solar, it's taking too long to permit. Solar farms, those that are building solar farms have been in my office saying, Kathy, it takes too long. It takes at least 3 years. So it is across the board, and we must address this. And I am hopeful. This is one of those issues, an idea whose time has come. There is a bipartisan recognition, and now we'll go to work on the details to actually get permitting reform done. And I believe it is one of those issues that can be addressed and will be addressed in the 118th Congress.
Yeah. It does seem like there is a culmination of both those on the left who want to get permitting done for renewable energy projects and Republicans who are more focused on getting some of these pipelines built. So it does feel like the moment is now. This industry is also really focused on the effects of climate change. We're an industry that's really focused on innovating our way out of this challenge. A number of API member companies in the room have a lot of big projects, particularly on carbon capture, utilization and storage technologies. Some of that got a boost in the last Congress, but I'd really like to hear from a Republican perspective how you're going to focus on this challenge as the new chair of the Energy and Commerce Committee.
Well, I'm really excited about American innovation, technology across the board, but as it relates to energy and energy climate solutions, as a Republican, I believe that our energy solutions are climate solutions. And so we're going to, and this current debate has often been framed as either you're all for renewable, it's either all renewables or no renewable. It's kind of it's all renewables or nothing. And I don't believe that that's the right way to frame the debate. And as we have done this rush to renewables, what we're seeing is that it jeopardizes reliability and affordability. One of the panelists yesterday was just talking about how the energy poverty is very real for the lowest income earners in this country. When your heating home bills are going up and your gas bills are going up, that is very real. That makes it harder for low income and it makes it harder for middle income Americans. So we need to always be vigilant to keep an eye on affordability and reliability. But there's exciting technology, exciting innovation. We should be embracing truly what American innovation technology can result in. The shale revolution, that was American technology that was developed, that unleashed natural gas in the United States of America. And not only has brought down natural gas prices for us, it has been one of the drivers in reducing carbon emissions, ensuring that America is leading in that, but it's one of the best things that we could do around the world. And Europe is really a cautionary tale right now about a future when you are shutting down key energy sources, those baseload energy, and then rushing to renewables that are not reliable or affordable, and then making yourself dependent upon other countries. America, I think we can be proud of the fact that we have led in energy solutions. We reduced our dependence upon OPEC and limit, so that they couldn't control prices. But now so many of the policies right now, I think critical minerals and supply chains that are controlled by China when it comes to wind, solar, and batteries, that isn't the future I want either. I don't want to be dependent upon China. We want to ensure that we have a secure energy future here driven by American innovation and technology that will result in us leading, meeting our needs, and also continuing to bring down carbon emissions, leading the world in bringing down carbon emissions and helping the world achieve their goals.
That's great. So I know you have to go to another event, but I did want to ask one more question. I want to go a little bit more personal here. So this Congress really began with a bang. Very controversial beginning. You're about to lead one of the most important committees in the United States Congress. I'm not going to say the most important because I don't want to offend others.
You can say that.
One of the most important, but it's also going to be divided on a partisan basis. You grew up on your family orchard. How did your upbringing prepare you for your time in Congress?
Right. Well, we're all a product of our experiences. Yes, my family owned an orchard and fruit stand in a small town in eastern Washington, Kettle Falls. Grew up working alongside my brother and parents. We raised cherries, peaches, apricots, pears, and apples, and sold everything at a fruit stand. And I'm so grateful for that foundation. It taught me hard work. It also taught me the importance of, the realities of a business and input cost. But I also remember my dad especially taught me the importance of neighbor helping neighbor. The years when things weren't going quite as well for all these small orchards along Peachcrest Road. The importance of working together as a community. My dad was always very, very active in the community, and that each one of us really makes a difference. So, I'm grateful for that foundation. I'm grateful for the honor of serving the people of Eastern Washington in Congress. I'm inspired every day by the people that I meet. And this country, the United States of America, here I am, the first in my family to graduate from college. That was my parents' dream for me, for as long as I could remember. I was saving my money. I was in 4-H. You save your money so you can go to college, have that opportunity for a better life. This country has done more to lift people out of poverty, raise the standard of living, more than any other country in the history of the world, while also leading in ensuring that we have clean air and clean water. We have the highest environmental standards. And you know what? We're not perfect. We're not perfect. None of us are perfect. But that search for a more perfect union continues. And what happens in our families, in our communities, makes a difference. But also, leadership and American leadership matters. So I'm very much in anticipation of this Congress and what we're going to be able to do. And I like to say the best is yet to come. So I look forward to working with all of you. Thank you for having me today.
Thank you, Kathy. This is wonderful.
Thank you.
So
Yeah,
much.
good.
Appreciate it.
Please welcome to the stage Congresswoman Lizzie Fletcher and Congresswoman Mary Sattler Peltola and Amanda Eversole.
Okay, so I think we may be making history this morning. Henry Cuellar is running late. We will add a chair when he gets here. But there are 3 women on the stage at State of American Energy. Okay, so we have not a lot of time, but a lot of road to cover. So let's just jump in. I'm going to do very brief bios. I think everybody knows these 2 incredible women on the stage. Lizzie Fletcher, who represents the 7th District of Texas, the energy capital of the world, the energy corridor on the west side of Texas. She has had an amazing career in the legal profession, has broke a number of barriers, including being the first woman partner at her law firm. I will also name check. She went to law school at the College of William & Mary, which happens to be my alma mater. And I will also note that my youngest daughter is named Lizzie, and so we already have a lot of things in common. I will just sidebar and tell you, last night I was telling my girls about today, and my oldest daughter, Ellie, was like, wait, you're not going to talk about me? So Ellie Eversole, I just want to let you know Mommy loves you very much. I'd also like to introduce Congresswoman Mary Peltola from the great state of Alaska. She represents Alaska's at-large congressional district, which means the entire state of Alaska. So the biggest congressional district in the country. You have not gone through not one, but two elections in the last 6 months, replacing the late Don Young. You also have an incredible number of firsts to account for, including being the first Alaska Native member of Congress, the first woman ever representing Alaska in the House of Representatives, the first Democrat since 1972, and I think importantly, a history of pragmatism and just getting things done and being nice to people. So thank you. Thank you for that. It really matters.
That's not a first. Yeah.
Well, sometimes it feels like it, doesn't it? So let's jump in. I think we got a wide range of topics to talk about today. And thank you very much for the panel earlier. Why don't we start broadly just talking about the importance of American energy. You both come from incredibly important energy producing states. So talk about, when we talk about the role of American energy, what does it mean for you back in your district? Why don't we start with you, Lizzie?
Sure. Well, I'm glad to talk about it, and it means so much in my district because, of course, I represent the energy capital of the world. I'm right there in Houston, and I see so many of my Houstonians here today, many folks that I've chatted with already this morning, who I've gotten to work with over the last few years, and I think it is so important for me to bring that perspective to Washington. And I have to say, starting out by saying, it was great to see my committee chairwoman. I serve on the House Committee on Energy and Commerce. I worked very hard to get on that committee in my second term because it's so important to my district, because it's what we do in my district. And I was so glad to hear Chairwoman McMorris-Rodgers talking about things in a way that really reflects where we are and this bipartisan approach that we need to take. Mike's speech was great, touching on that, on what American leadership means, on what American energy security means, and how much it matters to all of us. And I think it's really important for those of us from energy producing states to talk about our experience and to bring the expertise of our constituents to the conversation, and that's something that I've been committed to doing ever since I first got here. It's a really important perspective, and I just think that when we think about our leadership in the world, we shouldn't talk about it in contrast. We should talk about all the things we do together, and that's really been the theme that I've heard this morning, that we can lead on environmental protection, and we can lead on energy production, and we can lead on technology and innovation. And I really feel so proud because we do all of those things in my district. I mean, in my district, we touch every single part of the energy ecosystem, which is broad and vast, and something that many people don't have experience with all of those different parts. And so my experience as a lawyer coming into this, representing folks in the industry, learning about what they do, gives me the ability to come in and talk about environmental regulations, environmental safety protections, things that, in Houston, we start all of our meetings with a safety moment. I think everybody knows that. That is not everyone in Congress's experience, starting meetings at home. And so I think just being able to bring that perspective and talk about it and how we can lead in everything. And of course, the world that we're living in, especially over the last year, I think has reminded everyone in Congress how important it is to do so, and that we have an opportunity to do it right now. So very excited about this morning being here and being able to talk about those things today and throughout this Congress.
That's great. Congresswoman Peltola.
Thank you, Amanda. Yeah, for Alaska, 80-something% of our state budget is from oil revenues, oil taxes. So it is a huge, and that's really my background. I spent 10 years of public service in the state legislature. And of course, and in Alaska, we don't have the luxury of having a legislature that can come in every other year, as some states do. Good morning. Because other states have broad-based taxes. We don't have a broad-based tax. We don't have an income tax or a statewide sales tax. We are so reliant on the industry to really pay our bills and make sure that the things that we're constitutionally required to do as a state get paid for. And then as a rural person, I'm from Bethel, which is 400 miles west of Anchorage. Anchorage is our closest town. And we pay very high prices for electricity, sometimes 56 cents a kilowatt hour. I think that's not the highest rate for my region. We pay about $5 a gallon for both gas and stove oil, which is, and it was up around 6 or 7 recently. One of the communities around Kotzebue, and I'm not making this up, pays $17.99 for gas a gallon. and about $6.99 for stove oil a gallon. And it's very hard to even have a life as a hunter or a gatherer if you're paying $17.99 a gallon for gas. So prices of petroleum we're very aware of those. And even though oil is coming out of our backyard, we don't have a robust refinery system, so we're getting the gas and oil products that we use shipped up from Washington State. So anyway, that's just a little bit of the perspective from my state.
Yeah, that's great. And I'd like to welcome Henry Cuellar to the stage, who represents the 28th district, of Texas. And Henry, I think you're known to so many of these people in this room as just an incredible advocate for this industry. I also think that you really embody the American dream in many ways. You come from a family of migrant workers, and it is truly an honor to be on the stage with all three of you, but who really come from such different backgrounds, but who are willing to stand together to focus on solutions. And you have taken stands to represent the people of your district on a wide range of issues, but importantly, oil and gas. And so we're just doing a little bit of stage setting here and talking about the role and the importance of American energy to the people back home. So why don't we start there?
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for the invitation, Mike, and all of y'all, and to my colleagues. It's a pleasure being here. I'm sorry I'm a few minutes late. They were introducing the Chief Deputy Whip, so I could not miss the first meeting. So I got introduced and ran over here, so I apologize for being a few minutes late. Oil and gas is very important to my congressional district. We got the Eagle Ford, and then, of course, for the state of Texas, we're number one in oil and gas, but we're also number one in wind also. So we, as Liz knows, we work on that, and we understand oil and gas. When you talk about the energy, it's important to understand that it's got to be reliable, it's got to be affordable, it's got to be clean, and you all need to tell the story a lot better. All of us need to do that because you are doing the work right now. Oil and gas is important for jobs. I got thousands of jobs, direct jobs, indirect jobs in my congressional district in the state of Texas. For the state of Texas, I heard you. I said, who was in the legislature? I was in the state legislature also. And the biggest surplus we ever had, the state legislature started yesterday in Texas. And the largest surplus when I was in appropriations there was $6.5 billion. This time they have over $28 billion. The rainy day fund is overflowing, and two reasons. One is the recovery dollars that got sent down there, but more importantly, because of the oil and gas revenues that are coming in. They affect everything. I'll say this. If you look at one of my school districts and you take away the mineral interest, the oil and gas, one school district in my hometown would lose over $60 million in revenue. So either you take teachers off, or you make big changes or raise taxes. It's very important for jobs. It's very important for the economy, not only locally, but also for the state of Texas and, of course, across the nation itself. So being from the border, what the president, when they were there in Mexico, was important because one of the big issues that we need to talk about is how Mexico is treating our American energy companies there, and they need to play by the rules.
Yeah, great point. And I think that actually gets us to a very important topic that Mike talked about before, which is national security. When I joined API about 5 years ago, all the conversation was about climate policy, which is incredibly important. But national security, as a consequence of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, is incredibly front of mind for all Americans. And it's really changed the solution set and the way we talk about the choices and the direct implications, not just for us, but for our friends and allies abroad. So think about it, help us just pull that thread a little bit as we talk about national security and how that's changed your thinking as members of Congress. So I'll give you a jump ball here. Feel free.
Sure. Well, I'm happy to weigh in a little bit on that because I think it's really important to remember that as members of Congress, we come representing our districts, and we can sometimes be a little bit provincial, right? Thinking about home and what happens at home, and we tend to be very domestic policy focused in the Congress. But of course, we have our Foreign Affairs Committee, intelligence, national security is really important, and I think what we have seen especially over the last year, but since I've been in Congress, is really understanding that energy security is national security. And certainly nothing has brought that home more than Russia's invasion of Ukraine and what we've seen over the last year. And what I think that has done is really open up the dialogue between our colleagues about how these are interconnected. We've had the opportunity, and I was really glad to hear earlier that we may see some of these things continue to move forward in this Congress. I introduced a bill in the last Congress, the American Gas for Allies Act, with my colleague Alyssa Slotkin, who has a national security background, really trying to promote exports of American LNG to Europe to help make sure that they have the resources and that we can help provide them, addressing permitting reform, making sure that we can do things to help move our energy, one of the 3 pillars of the theme this morning. And I think that what we have seen is that putting energy security in this context, people have talked a lot about energy independence as kind of a buzzword without necessarily attaching specific policy to that. And I think we're having much more in-depth conversations about what that actually means, that energy independence means security, but understanding also how this global ecosystem works. Again, I keep using the term ecosystem because that's really what it is. And there are a lot of people who are just beginning to understand the difference between upstream and midstream and downstream, who are understanding what, the refining that we do, some of the challenges that we have when it comes to refining capacity. Chairwoman McMorris-Rodgers talked about some of the challenges that we have when it comes to certain kinds of energy. I think what we've seen in the last 2 Congresses is some real progress in terms of support for bringing these together, encompassing this all of the above approach. And as Henry mentioned, in Texas, people are sometimes surprised when I say we lead, I think 5 times more than the next highest wind producing state. In Texas, we believe in an all of the above approach, and we understand that you're putting together a puzzle with different pieces that can fill different needs. And that's the conversation that we need to continue to have. And I think it's important to have it in a bipartisan way. So I'm just gonna add to that. That was a great theme of the speech as well. I think it's really important for everyone in the room to remember that this process of educating members of Congress and engaging with members of Congress should go on and does go on all the time and should happen with everyone, no matter who has the gavels, because one of the most important things that we can do is depoliticize this conversation around our energy future. And one of the best ways to do that is to talk about our national security and understand it in that frame. And so I think that has been a really important part of the dialogue in moving us forward. And I think that there has certainly been an increased interest that I've seen from colleagues in just wanting to understand better what it is you do, how you do it, how we can do it, where we're all coming to this from the place of shared values and shared objectives. And I think that this has been a really important part in shaping the conversation, especially over the last year.
Yeah, I think that shared ambition for the ability to make energy discussions on energy really supersede partisanship. It wasn't so long ago that energy were much more regional issues as opposed to partisan issues. And so I'll come back to getting your advice on how we might go about doing that. But Mary, I know you wanted to jump in.
Well, I wanted to jump in before Lizzie said everything I wanted to say. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's one of the challenges of Congress, I think.
Yeah. No,
Welcome to seniority.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, speaking of seniority, if you want to go first, Henry.
No, you're good. No, I'm glad you're here.
Okay. Well, then let me mix it up a little bit, which is, innovation is also another major theme that we've talked about today. And innovation, not just in a vacuum, but innovation for the purposes of reducing carbon emissions from our atmosphere. And I think that this country is so incredible, and for our distinction, we have something about the American psyche that is able to find ways, things that were otherwise impossible. And I think that is bringing us closer. And I know you've worked on bipartisan solutions and bringing in the Houston area of thinking about a variety of different ways, in particular on hydrogen hubs. But maybe Mary or Henry, if you could think about just how should we think about innovation? As opposed to regulating everything to a stop, how do we look forward and look to unleash some of the potential of that American ingenuity?
Well, and some of the thoughts that I just have kind of swirling around in general are Some of the worst producers, some of the dirtiest producers are also very adversarial. They're not concerned about safety moments. They're not concerned about worker rights. They're not necessarily concerned about the environment. And they are our biggest adversaries. So I think it's, the role of the United States is so important because we are leaders in all of those different areas. And I think that the permitting process that we have now, I know that it is quite exhaustive, and it takes about 100 permits to get any project going forward. I think that there are some issues with the administration and different agencies not understanding the critical timelines that especially places like Alaska has to work around. Our construction seasons are very short. Either for building things in the summer, you only have about 3 or 4 months. You have to make sure things get on the right barge at the right time. Our shipping, our logistics supply chain is much more challenging than a lot of places. And then in the winter, for winter construction, that season is now shrinking because the shoulders of fall and spring are lengthening now because of various differences in our climate now. But the other thing is, I really appreciate what the last panel talked about, the all of the above approach. I don't think it's one or the other. I don't think any of us see it as one or the other. We really have to be doing everything. And we are innovators. I think that one of the benefits, unfortunately, of this global situation that we're in now with some of our foreign adversaries is we're not taking energy for granted. We're not, we're just very much more aware of our energy issues and the fact and how much it plays into inflation and things like that. So I don't think that was your question, but those are my comments.
No, but you raised a great point, though, because I think when we think about the role that the business community has, in this case, oil and gas companies have, there's a real responsibility to our communities, to our employees, to our shareholders, to those with whom we interact regularly. And API has a couple of programs. One is called Energy Excellence. It's really demonstrative of how being part of API, we seek higher standards. Higher standards, not just the standards that we set and we provide to help ensure the safety of our people and our communities, but also to really represent, this is not just the bare minimum, that this industry is going above and beyond to ensure that we can meet growing needs for demand, but do so safely and out of deep respect for the environment and for our communities. And it's something that's really core to who we are as an organization, and I think that your point is well taken. But Henry, what can we do as members of Congress here on the stage to help unleash or unlock that innovation?
Yeah, and let me, before I answer that, let me mention something Lizzie said that's very important. National security, I want you to remember this date, December 15, 2015. Anybody remember that date, December 15, 2015? That's the day that the Appropriations Committee on the Omnibus Bill passed the lifting the ban for the oil exports. And I remember that because I used to joke around with Joe Barton. I said, you have it easy. You got to work with Republicans. We Democrats have to build, but I think we did have like 27, 28 Democrats. But I remember that because the first export was from the Eagle Ford to Corpus Christi and then went off to Europe. I think that lifting the ban was probably one of the most important things, as Lacey said. It's not only creating jobs here, giving us the independence, but it also provides us the ability to send LNGs over there, because if you go to Eastern Europe or some of the areas there are countries that used to depend 70% on Russian gas. And talk about trying to turn that off during winter, they're in a very difficult situation. So this provides us to play into world geopolitics. Innovation is key. Now, we can do certain things to reduce regulations, permitting. I know some of us have talked for many years on trying to get that done. We need to do that. But I know that in the appropriations, we've added monies for carbon capture. We've added millions of dollars also for methane emissions, because after all, as we've said, energy companies are not the problem, the enemy. The enemy are the emissions, so we got to work on that innovation to address that. Now, again, we can do some, but the innovation is going to come from you all. Carbon capture, the largest carbon capture is going to be in the Permian Basin, Oxy. Oxy, where are they? I'm sure. Thank you. Appreciate it. Because again, I think it's going to be 120 times bigger than any other place in the world. So that type of innovation has to be key. So we can do some to make it conducive, but a lot of it is going to be from you all. And we all together have to tell the story together on that innovation and how we need to go after the emissions and not the energy companies.
And I'd love to just tack on to what Henry said there, because I do think this is a really important place where you can come with important ideas and creative ideas. And one of the things I'm really proud that we did in the Inflation Reduction Act was deal with the 45Q tax credit, dealing with making it possible for people to do this innovation. And that comes from understanding that the time frame takes a long time, whether it's permitting and getting a project done, or whether it is just making the investment and knowing that you have a regulatory environment that is somewhat predictable so that you can make these giant investments. And I think that is something that we were responsive to in the last Congress. I look forward to seeing what you all do with that. And also making sure that when we talk about permitting reform, we talk about these other things, it really is about the number one thing I've heard since I've been here, which is people in every industry and any context coming into my office and saying, we just want to know what the rules of the road are so that we can plan. And I think that we've done some important work to try to help address that, especially when it comes to carbon capture, but in other areas too. And so I hope to see us continue to do that. But that comes from the really nitty-gritty policy, not just talking about our values, but talking about what are the things we can actually do that will make a meaningful difference. And so that engagement really is so important.
And I just want to add on, the earlier, with the track that we were on track to reduce emissions by 30% in 2030. And after the Inflation Reduction Act, we're on track to reduce emissions by 40% by 2030. And I think that's remarkable, and I think it's noteworthy, and there's so often only, kind of the worst case, kind of verbiage, but I think it's important for us to recognize when we are making gains.
I think that's so important, right? So much of the discussion is built on conflict, is built on things that are going in the wrong track, and it is hard to bring the things that are working and the things where there's collaboration. And I think that's such a good point, because one of the things that have come to the top of the list today is that Republicans and Democrats in this room, in this discussion today, have both agreed on the importance of permitting reform. And I think it would be very helpful for all of the folks in this room and watching or on TV and online. What advice do you have? Because of course the devil is in the details. When we talk about permitting reform, we can agree conceptually. But how in this Congress, in this political environment, particularly for Democrats, how should we think about permitting reform in the spirit of that it's good for everybody? It should be good for all forms of energy. So what do we do to get that done together?
So, one of the things that's top of mind for me right now is the Willow Project. And, I don't know if everybody in the room knows about the Willow Project. It's on the North Slope of Alaska. It is now feasible because of a 7-mile directional drilling reach. And this is very exciting for us because I think it could mean about 3 million barrels a month, I think, once it gets online. I think that number is right. But one of the things that I see is ConocoPhillips in their iterative permitting process. They're on alternative E. That means 5 times they have responded to local concerns. And yet there is this push among some to go to alternative F, which means that that may be a deal breaker. But to have an iterative process go back and forth in a meaningful way 5 different times, I think we have to be more open to the art of the possible and not just constantly demanding more.
That's a great point.
Okay. I think it starts off with perspective. Sometimes, and this both on behalf of the companies and members of Congress, perspective. Sometimes there are companies that look at a member and they see the D, bad. They see an R, good. Then there's perspectives from members that see, company X, good, energy, bad. So we got to start off with that perspective and get to know the companies and what they're doing and the members that are willing to sit down with the energy companies to do that. And then, of course, the perspective is expanding where members and other folks know more what you do. Because usually when you think about an energy company, you think about oil and gas. But it's a lot more. And I'll tell you a quick story. When there were some protesters, I've told Mike this, protesters, and I don't know if you remember that, there's under the tunnel, there's some glass doors. So the protesters, what they did is they got glue and they glued themselves and they were yelling, fossil fuel Democrats and all that. They were just going on and on and on. Well, when I walked by and I saw him, I said, I don't know if you know this, but that glue is made out of petroleum. And he tried to pull himself on. Good thing that glue was good. So what I'm saying, there are so many and by the way, afterwards when the EMS came in and took them out, you literally could see for a while their handprint where the skin was at. Those are true protesters. So I say this because, perspective and what you do. You do a lot more than just the energy. There are so many products, plastics and et cetera, that depend on what you do. So telling that story is important. And finally, I don't know if API still do this, but I know that in the past I've gotten a one-pager of jobs, revenues, everything that goes in, how many pipelines, center. And if you do that to everybody, every district, people will be surprised what activity you have in their own back. A lot of people, well, we did that a couple of years ago, they had no idea what was happening in their own district. So that type of information is important.
Yeah, I think that's important. And just picking up on something Henry said, I think that this process of educating members about these issues is just constant. And again, I think the biggest risk that we face is the politicization of energy, where Republicans have it right and Democrats have it wrong, or Democrats have it right and Republicans have it wrong. That's not good for anybody, because as we've seen, who has the gavels changes. And I think it's really important for everybody to understand that this is a commitment to engagement and education. And there are people who are willing to hear it, and whatever is the most meaningful. Certainly people care about their constituents and the jobs that they have. People care about the kinds of things that we're able to do when we work together. And last summer, there have been a couple of things in the last couple of years that have been conversation changers, whether it was what we saw happening with the Colonial Pipeline and cybersecurity, and people realizing that as gas prices were going up on the East Coast because we couldn't move the energy, or thinking about emissions from trucking versus building pipelines to move product. I think it's really important to just be continually engaged in that conversation and not to make assumptions, but certainly to recognize that people are talking. And one of the biggest things, I say this for my constituents who've heard this, or people who've heard me say this before, speak for yourselves. I think it's really important that sometimes people up here talk and people assume they're speaking for you, but they're not saying what you're saying. And certainly it's true of the companies that operate in my district, which is many of them. There's this commitment to innovation that you were asking about earlier, the kinds of things that we see being developed. And I've always got little anecdotes about things, including anybody who uses a screw pull as the only wine opener that really works, invented by someone who was in the oil and gas business, and at Rice University, gave it to Rice University, because it's an inventive culture, right? The amount of technology and invention that goes on in this business is amazing, but people don't recognize that because they're not consumer products. It's not your iPhone being invented in Houston, but there are a whole lot of things that you are using that are being invented by folks in this industry. And so I think it's really important to make the connections about what all of those things are, but also to make sure that you know that it's important for you to engage and for you to tell your story, because a lot of people make assumptions about what you're going to say. And when you say what you have to say, it's different. And so just make sure that you are engaging. Henry told a story and it was very useful. I think every member of Congress will tell you telling stories is a great way to get your point across, because that's what humans react to. And it's important for you to tell your own story and to have partners and allies who help you tell your story and make sure that the message that you want to deliver is the message being delivered.
That's fantastic. Well, I am full of optimism, not just because it's a new year, but because we've had substantive conversations throughout the morning today. And we focused on areas where there's agreement, where there's potential, because it's right for the American people. And it's right for the communities that we serve, and there's an aspiration of always doing better. So I would like to thank you all for joining us this morning, and I would also like to just remind you, we want to continue this conversation. This is not just about a nice event that we had, but I would like to thank the staff and those that have served us this morning, because it was an incredible event this morning. But I would like you to just follow us online, continue to the conversation, make sure that we're educating our friends and those who don't yet know that they will be our friends. So thank you so much. We appreciate your time. Enjoy your day, and join me in thanking these wonderful members.
This concludes the 2023 State of American Energy. Thank you for joining us.